What's up guys, I'm Matt and today I'm going to show you how to pan fry the perfect T-bone steak. Alright guys, so for cooking the steak we're going to need a heavy bottom pan, a knife just to cut things up, the T-bone steak, some salt and some pepper, olive oil, garlic, and some butter. Alright, so the first thing you need to do is you need to get your pan nice and hot. You want to use a heavy bottom pan because a heavy bottom pan is going to hold the heat better. So basically what happens is that you get the pan nice and hot, and then after when you put the steak in, if it's not a heavy bottom pan, sometimes it'll cool down the steak and it'll make it so it starts boiling. So when you use a heavy bottom pan, it holds the heat better and that'll allow it to get a better sear. So you start off, you go here, you go right on up to a nice medium high. The other thing you want to do is you always want to warm up your pan without any oil in it, because if you do put oil in right from the get-go, the oil will burn. And it won't be very good, especially olive oil starts to have kind of a tangy taste when it burns. So you let the pan get nice ripping hot, and then right before you're ready to put the meat in, you put your oil in just to heat it up a little bit, and then you get a nice sear on your steak. Okay, so while the pan is heating up, what you want to do now is you want to season your steak. Normally for the salt, you want to use a large grain salt, like a kosher salt or a sea salt. Again, I don't have any today, so we're just going to use regular table salt, but you want to, especially with a big piece of meat, season it generously. So don't be shy, it might seem like a lot at first, but the meat will be able to take on the flavor and it won't be too salty. So you start off with a bunch of salt and a bunch of pepper. Alright guys, so the steak is now salt and peppered. One thing I wanted to mention is that I took the steak out 20 minutes out of the fridge beforehand. That way the steak would come back to room temperature, which will help it cook all the way through better. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you never want to salt your steak too early. So always do it after you start warming up the pan. That way you're not drawing out any water, which will also lead to boiling on the steak. You want to really get a good sear. So only salt when you're getting really ready to throw the steak into the hot pan. The other thing I wanted to mention is that later on we're going to be using butter to ladle over top of the steak. Always use unsalted butter. That way you get to control your salt. You're not getting too much salt from the salt on the steak and then also on the butter at the same time. Another thing I wanted to mention is about your prep. Always have your stuff ready to go so you're not searching around for it, because once the steak starts going and it's hot in the pan, you don't want to be fooling around with cutting stuff up and crushing the garlic and getting your tools and stuff ready. So always have everything you need ready before you get started, and that way you're not searching for it and you can concentrate more on the heat in the pan and how your steak's doing. Alright guys, so I just put a little drop of water into the pan and just to see, to make sure that it's nice and hot, and it is. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to put a little bit of olive oil on the inside, let it heat up really quickly, and then we're going to put the steak in. Just a little bit of olive oil, let it dance, and let it dance around. Warm up a little bit, and just swish it around. Got nice heat in there. Then you take your steak, and you put it in, and you always lay it facing away from you, so that no oil will splash on you. So you put it down. And that's the sound you want to get. You want to get a nice hard boil, and you let it sit there and you let it create a nice hard crust. So oftentimes one mistake that I see people make is that they're trying to move their steak too early. And you'll notice when you're trying to pick up the steak, what will happen is that it's going to stick to the pan. If you properly sear a side of the steak, it'll actually release from the pan by itself. So one of the important things to do is to really just let your meat sit down, let it really create a nice deep crust. Don't play with it too much. Let it really develop the taste and the flavor from the crust. And then when it's ready, it'll be nice and easy to pick it up and turn it over. Alright, so you want to let your steak cook and render down for about 2 minutes on each side. And then once you're done on one side, you pick it up. And you flip it over to the other side. Alright, so now that you're on the other side, one important thing is that you've got at the back of the steak here, you've got what's called a fat cap, and you always want to render that down as well to cook down the fat a little bit. So you just turn it on in, and you hold it and you let it cut down a little. Alright, now that we've got the fat cap nice and rendered down, we're going to turn down the heat a little bit, and we're going to take our garlic. Just crush it, don't need to peel or anything, you just throw it in there and let it just start getting aromatic in there. You could also throw in your thyme here if you have some. And at the same time, you're going to take your butter, and you're just going to place it around the steak. And this is where we're going to have to start being really active, because the butter is going to cut down, and then we're going to be ladling the butter over top of the steak. Alright guys, so here now that the butter is in, one of the techniques that you do is called ladling. You turn your steak up on end with the fat side on the end of the pan, and you start ladling over the butter. Put the garlic on top, and you just ladle that garlic butter right on top of it. You want to keep it moving, you got to stay active, or if not, everything will burn. Your butter doesn't have a very high smoke point, and you just ladle it over. Once you ladle it over on one side, down, put the steak back over, always away from yourself. Put that garlic back on top, and start ladling it over again. Alright guys, so the steak's off the pan. So you always want to undercook your steak just a little bit, because at this stage where you're going to let it rest for at least 5 to 10 minutes, it's going to cool down. And the reason why you want to let it rest is because if it's too hot, all the juices start to escape while you're cutting through it. So you let the cooking process finish up, and at the same time you're just letting the muscle relax a little bit, so that when you're cutting into it, you don't lose all the juices. So we'll come back and see the steak in about 5-10 minutes. Alright, so our steak has now rested for about 5 minutes, and now we're going to cut the meat off the bone. The steak is divided into two parts. It's a sirloin steak, so on this side you have your sirloin, and on this side it's actually, what some people don't know, that this is actually, when cut off and sold separately, this is actually filet mignon. So that's what the steak is. We're going to cut it off and then we're going to divide. Alright, so our steak is now divided into two parts. This is the filet mignon and this is the sirloin. So now we're just going to slice it up and see how it looks. You always want to, when cutting your steaks, cut down against the grain, and that just makes for nicer cuts. And there you have it, guys. Pan-fried T-bone steak. This one looks to be actually more close to medium than medium rare, which is a little bit overcooked, but it's not the thickest steak in the world, as you can see. But yep, there it is. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to message me, and thanks for watching. That's it. Nice. Good girl. Where's your good girl? You like the steak? Do you like the steak? Are you a good girl? Was that good? You want more steak? Is that good?